we're ready to get started. I'm now going to hand over to Professor George, who I think is busy checking some fake news, just to verify, right? And then he will take us through our session, and then we'll do a podcast session after that. Professor George, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ben, and welcome to this first session. I'm sure many of you have interacted with the issues that we're going to be dealing with or examining this afternoon, so it's nothing new to you, which is dealing with disinformation, fake news and propaganda, and empowering communities to sort fact from fiction in the age of fast-speed traveling information. So I suppose this is a very interesting subject, and especially to the people that are in this forum. And sometimes we, of course, struggle to define what disinformation is. But just to offer a very broad definition of what disinformation is that it is misleading and incorrect information that is deliberately put out there to deceive or influence people. And oftentimes it is distributed in a targeted manner. I think we've seen this across East Africa, especially around political or election time, when various actors, and especially, sometimes it's even public relations, actors that are told to engage in disinformation as part of political campaigning. To help us deal with some of these issues is a panel of three experts, or people that come from different, sectors. And the first one will be Odanga Madung. Unfortunately, Odanga Madung will not be with us for very long, so he's asked to speak first. And Odanga Madung is joining us online. He's a journalist, a fellow at Mozilla Foundation, and co-founder of Odipo Dev. Over the years, he's developed a deep understanding of media and information systems. This seen his investigation into social media companies lead them to make significant changes to how they operate in Kenya and the wider African continent. And he's written for various publications, including The Guardian, Wired, BuzzFeed, Quartz, and The Daily Nation. So is someone that is experienced in these matters and is going to help us interrogate the issues. The other panelist is Rukia Nabbanja. I hope that I pronounced that correctly. So I'm doing very well in my Luganda. Thanks, and you know what that means. Anyway, Rukia Nabbanja is a fact checker, head of the production and co-founder of Debunk Media Initiatives. And I think we've seen a few of her colleagues here. Debunk Media Initiative is a fact-checking organization in Uganda, where she has dedicated most of her time to doing development journalism and making sure that factual information is accessible for people to make informed life decisions. She's the producer, script, and video editor behind the Debunk product dubbed The Debunk Show, where together with her team, they demystify fake news and misinformation by creating content that counters the information that is spreading, that is mis and disinformation. And I think we ought to differentiate and know the difference between disinformation and misinformation, because that is important for us to know. But anyway, the spreading of misinformation and disinformation on social media and in our local communities. Rukia is a fellow and graduate of the Media Challenge Fellowship. And big up to the organization and our partner. I think we're doing very well. And that was a class of 2022. She's also a constructive journalism fellow under the DW Academy. Again, big up to our partner, DW Academy. And The other panelist is Jeniffer Kaberia, I think, who's a child of development, is a child, rather, child development specialist, an international development work professional with a passion for children. So some of the issues that we're going to be dealing with today is, for instance, how to debunk information or misinformation, disinformation mostly related to children, and whether children have the capacity to actually sift facts from all the fiction that we see out there. Our vision is to transform Africa's story through empowering children to speak for themselves, data-driven solutions and technology that is Afro-centric. She believes this will result in a positive outcome in Africa that touches not only socioeconomic development, but also humanity. And I think that is very important. Jeniffer spent over 10 years working in the child development sector on an array of community, district, national, and international projects. In 2017, Jeniffer founded Mtoto News, and I think that is what she's representing here, an online platform to improve the lives of children through technology. Mtoto News uses the power of media and data to provide a platform for children to participate in developing solutions to the challenges that face them. Jeniffer is a Harvard Law School fellow and announced at the Institute of Rebooting Social Media. YALI, I think this is Young African Leadership Initiative, Eastern Africa Fellow. She holds a BA in Sociology and Communication from the University of Nairobi and an MA in Child Development from Daystar University. So welcome, Jeniffer, to these conversations. Yes, I've been told that Odanga needs to drop out of this meeting at 2:40. All right, let's get down to business. And Odanga, I hope that, oh yes, there you are. Please, maybe take a few minutes to tell us how, for instance, we have to deal with disinformation and fake news and propaganda, and especially how do you empower the communities that you work with to sift, fiction, fact from fiction, and especially because information travels so fast. And I think, as we've heard before, that misinformation or false information travels so fast around the world before truth has an opportunity to put its pants on. Welcome. We can't hear you yet. You're muted. Please unmute. Oh. You have muted yourself again.
Oh. Hello.
There you are. All right, proceed, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank all of you for. Thank you all for allowing me to grace this amazing occasion. I unfortunately could not be able to make it to Uganda and enjoy the amazing fruit that the host was hinting to, but I hope next time I'll be able to get a chance to attend. Now, I think when I speak about specifically, maybe let's talk in a much more wider sense in terms of, both misinformation and disinformation. I believe that this is largely an accountability problem, and that, the kind of issues we have with our information environments and the kind of problems that lead to the rise of misinformation and disinformation within our information ecosystems are not things that are happening by accident, but are actually happening by design. And much more so when it comes to disinformation, and even less sometimes when it comes to misinformation. I believe that these are largely accountability problems that need accountability approaches in order for us to be able to try and deal with them and solve them. The reason lies are able to be able to go across the world in twice as fast, or rather in twice as fast as the truth, is partly because a lot of the social media platforms we use are designed in a way that allows such lies to be able to travel as fast as they do across the world. And there's a big question of, how do we hold social media companies accountable for the lies that they allow to fester within our communities? Because a lot of the time, it is very clear, especially from some of the investigations that we have done at the Mozilla Foundation, that a lot of the information, what we call now in much wider terms information disorder, has been enabled by unscrupulous business practices by social media platforms, because they design social media platforms in a way that the idea of virality, in essence, is designed to allow information to travel at a very, very high speed without necessarily being verified. And so there has been a very big effort within the civil society, within various civil society organizations, to have social media platforms try and rein in the kind of information that is moving across their social networks, at least most of the false information, just so that it keeps, because a lot of these things actually have real world harms and real life consequences that go ahead and actually pose a great danger to communities. So to answer your question, for me, how I deal with this problem is by investigating disinformation campaigns and trying to understand exactly how, number one, platforms help propagate them, and understand who the people are that organize such kinds of campaign, and of course also to understand where money exchanges hands in the case of such kinds of practices. We've just come from a study where we identified that Facebook actually had been taking money to promote election misinformation in Kenya in the days following the elections here. So we do have a serious regulatory problem, regulatory framework issue here in terms of how we hold these platforms accountable. But it's also very important to understand and to keep in mind that we cannot allow for overreach from even government bodies to happen. Mostly because these tools have also become an important avenue for freedom of expression. And as people like to say, even in Kenya, that Kenyans on Twitter are the official opposition in this country. So I think that's my 2 cents on your question. And yeah,
let's pause there for a moment and let's fact check the claim that Facebook received money to maybe to advance falsehood. And I'm using that whatever, just because in the morning we were talking about our ability to put out there empirical data, verifiable information, and credible and reliable data. How reliable is that claim that Facebook received money to advance falsehood or to engage in disinformation? That is one. And what exactly do you mean by accountability approaches to dealing with disinformation? Okay. Just very quickly.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that we noticed during the elections here in Kenya was that there are 2 things that are very important to consider here during, or rather within an election context, which is that Kenya actually has something called an election silence period. I think many of the other, maybe within the East African countries, there's also a case where, there are election silence periods that are mandated. And an election silence period essentially is a time when campaigns are essentially supposed to stop a few days before the elections, right? And in some countries, they actually implement them weeks before and even weeks and the weeks after elections. Now, in our research, or rather while we were doing our research, one of the things that we were able to identify was that we had a very, very big problem in the days following the elections, where we had a lot of premature and unverified election result claims that were going around social media platforms within the country. Now, both TikTok and Twitter actually decided to go about and implement labeling policies to let people know that a lot of verified info, or rather that the information that was being released by some individuals was yet to be verified and could potentially be false. But on Facebook, on top of them not having a very specific labeling policy for that, we went ahead and found several advertisements within the advertising ecosystem where people were actually able to purchase purchase ads containing unverified information about election results way before the IEBC, which is the Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission here in Kenya, had been able to announce them. And again, for Facebook, in order for Facebook to be able to advertise to give you their advertising services, because money has to be able to exchange hands. You can find the report online, and I think the story was also broken by restofworld.org as well. So it's something that is available for everyone here to be able to access.
All right, thanks, Odanga. Let me ask Jeniffer on the issue of, because Odanga just mentioned that disinformation is sometimes put out there by unscrupulous business people, and especially, the operations of some of these social media platforms. And ask the question, and especially because our children are suffering, and there's sometimes the phenomenon of dealing with the harm, especially on children, based on their access to online platforms. How do you empower children to sift fact from fiction and ensure that they are not harmed by the content that is available on those platforms? Because there's a lot of trivia, a lot of good stuff, but a lot of trivia as well, and harmful content.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. I just want to piggyback on what he has said. Misinformation is enabled by the big tech. That's a reality. And unfortunately, big tech does not put children in mind, okay? So it's about money, okay? And so just also piggybacking on what he has said, that misinformation, the definition of misinformation, what we define misinformation here probably is not what misinformation in the Western world. So it's very subjective to us, okay? So it is us who know it is misinformation, but unfortunately, now that everybody has been fired, both Facebook and Twitter, we don't know if the African human resources is available to be able to identify some of these things. How does misinformation affect children? So if you have been a teenager, which all of us have been, you remember there's something your dad or your mom did or your guardian did, and you thought your world was coming to an end. So all of us, and if you've seen, they all react like, my world is going to come an end. Or you take something from them and say, you're destroying my whole world. They're not overreacting. And you're like, oh, teenagers are overreacting, children are not they're not overreacting. That's a reality to them, that at that particular time, their world is coming to an end. So imagine a child reading a misinformation about, for example, we're in Uganda. Those guys, they're called the guys who fight in northern Uganda. They're coming towards Kampala, okay? What happens? They read and they think the whole world is coming to an end because their development, their brain has not developed fully to be able to logically look at this information, okay? So, and that's why it is important when we are training children, we train them on how to be able to critical thinking, to look at that information like I don't think it is okay. Their first reaction is like, my world is coming to an end. There is fire, okay? Everything is falling down. But one of the things that we teach children is how to critical thinking. Look at this thing and look at it with a pinch of salt. And we tell them, everything that you see online is not a reality. Okay, it's not true. What you see online is not true. So we try to empower children, and then we try to help them to fact check in different ways. You know, go check, is it trending on Twitter? Okay, and then look at the major news outlets. Have they reported on it? But unfortunately, even the mainstream media, some of them online, their digital platforms, they spread misinformation. Okay, like in Kenya. during the election. So we conducted a study because, for us, we had a very long election period, like 2 months, and it was causing anxiety on children. So we sent out a survey at how are your children reacting to what is affecting your children. And the number one thing was misinformation, okay? And most of the information was coming, one, through the newspapers, okay, because a journalist did not take time to go and verify, and they put it online, okay? So as much as you're teaching children, go verify, okay? Google it, look at the website, do they have misspelling? But again, unfortunately, nowadays our journalists their articles are not the best, So, and then social media, because of them, so many areas, so as much as they're verifying, but we need to, for me, my biggest thing, let's work with big tech. Let's enable big tech to start engineering ethically. If they can be able to bring Rihanna's products on my face to buy, they can actually be able to do something about misinformation. Thank you.
Let me ask a follow-up question. How do you, or maybe first I should say, because you've mentioned some things that are general, seem very general.
Yep.
Is that born out of empirical evidence, for example, that this content is harmful to children in East Africa, or is it an assumption that we tend to make? And how do you empower? Just give us, exactly what it is that you do. How do you empower children, even the ones that are based outside these big cities and, urban spaces? How do you empower those children?
So welcome all of you for our session tomorrow in the afternoon. We are going to go deeper into this, but we train children on digital literacy, okay? And the five competence areas. One of the competence areas is critical thinking, okay? The other one is online safety, okay? The other one is creativity. Create your own content that is verified, okay? And creating your own content. So when a child goes and said, for example, they have said something about addiction, I don't believe it. Create your own content, okay? And then being nice being nice. Being nice is a digital competence. And today I've read a sixth one, which I thought is very interesting. Ignoring, okay? If you see something online and you don't like it, you don't have to read it. Nobody's forcing it. Just ignore it as a digital competence. So we teach them on digital literacy and the 5 skills to be able to navigate all these areas. And we provide for them a platform to be able to create their own content that they know is verified. And verified means if you come to a class, we say research, research, and research. Those are the three areas when you're writing a story. NTV or Monitor, or I hope I'm not taking the same group of companies, say, if they're saying this, do your own research and come with your own data. Is it verified? Does it have a data backing? And then you can be able to write the story. So that's how we help our children. And then they always have come to us and ask, do you think this is true? Do you think this is true? They have people who can be able to ask and to verify that information. Thank you.
Do you cover children that are based, say, in Gulu and Turkana? And
yes, we have kids from, actually not only Kenya, we have kids from here in Uganda. You'll meet them tomorrow. We have kids from Uganda. We have kids from Rwanda. We are trying to go West Africa, but we have kids from, and not only in capital centers, we have also from the rural areas. Yeah.
Right. All right. Thanks, Jeniffer. Rukia, fact-checking. How effective is fact-checking in enhancing media trust and credibility and reliability, issues that we've been talking about? How effective have you been in ensuring that the media remains, or serves public interest and remains credible and is able to be trustworthy?
Yeah, so I come from the Bank Media Initiative, and we are innovators and residents of the Aga Khan School of Media Innovation. And I would strongly say that if there was no fact-checking, I think the world would be in chaos. We would have a lot of things that are happening based on feelings, based on personal opinions and thoughts, yeah? So most of the information that we get to consume online is tailored to create a certain kind of reaction from the consumers. And with how fake news is really traveling really so fast than real information, the effect is most likely going to be, it will happen in front of our faces without us even noticing it. So what we are actually doing is, as we are fact-checking, because we are only a small team of people who can counter fake news at the same rate, equally the same rate at which it is traveling into the communities. And we are rolling out a plan to do community outreaches. And how we are doing that, we started with our very immediate audiences, which are youths who are engaging actively on social media and spaces like Twitter and TikTok and so much more. And we are going to universities, yeah? And kind of teach these young, amazing people how they actually get to spot misinformation. That is one thing, because it also takes someone who is informed about how certain kind of information that is meant to create certain feelings or incite the community to do something, to identify that this is actually not right. So one has to first be able to identify that this is probably not right, to be able to do something about it. And the intention in this is to make sure that we break the cycle at which a certain kind of message, maybe about the president, is being retweeted or shared by so many people, a certain post that has a lot of damaging information that gets to be retweeted 1,000 times. It means those people who are also following me, if I am retweeting fake information, are consuming that kind of information that I believed should be shared. So if I get to break the cycle from I've seen, I haven't verified, I am not sharing, means that my audiences are not going to consume that kind of information again. So for me, fact-checking is really critical, and we need to put in consideration the audiences we serve, yeah, as the media and as journalists. If I'll give an example of my mother. My mother is an ardent follower of politics in Uganda, and she would spend a lot of money to put data on her phone to watch Lumbuye, for those of you that know that guy, yeah? So this guy is really, really full of a lot of information that if my mother does not have the knowledge to differentiate between what is right about all these statements, my mother is going to send me that link in my WhatsApp to be able for me to watch this. And I got, earlier this year, I got in a situation where I have to be with her like almost most of the time. And I realized that 70% of her time, she was watching a very big spreader of misinformation. Because I know I am able to see, to hear and say this is not right. But my mother, who is deep down in Hoima, cannot. My mother is believing all this kind of information, and she would get in sort of conversations and arguments with my grandmother about these ideas, but they are not speaking from a point of, we know these are facts. They just don't even know that they are consuming misinformation or disinformation, political disinformation that has, that might have the same effect as someone who even knows and gets to spread it. So fact-checking is important, I believe.
Rukia, just hold on to your thoughts there, because I think Odanga said that he's going to be out at 2:40. I don't know whether Odanga is still there. Has he left?
Yeah. I'm
Oh,
here.
you're still there. Okay. I thought before he leaves, and because he said some things that need serious interrogation, I thought maybe someone from the floor has a question for him or a comment for him before he leaves. Anybody?
Actually,
yes,
I just wanted to add just a quick one. I don't know if you can hear me.
we can.
Great. I just wanted to add on, sorry, the Zoom link got switched, so I ended up dropping off. But I really wanted to also, there was a question that came out about the empirical evidence about the damage that social media is doing, that social media has to children. There was one very big scandal last year where, Meta and its platforms actually did their own internal research around the effects that social media companies are having, especially companies such as Instagram, are having on children. And even from their own research, they were able to identify for, I think, it was for a set number of girls out of 10, Instagram actually made women who had body issues 10 times worse. And I this is not something that is completely foreign. Like, I'm not surprised that that is actually happening, given that even amongst that even such anxieties exist even amongst adult populations as well. So given when you consider the kind of anxieties that adults are likely to face because of social media, things like keeping up with the Joneses, trying to make sure that they always have the latest flashy thing, you can imagine that such kind of effects are actually 10 times worse when it comes to children. And it's actually based off of their own research. The effects of these things are likely to have on our children is actually something of very big concern, and that we should actually try and pay as much attention to as well. That's of course not to say that it also has some maybe positive benefits to child development, but that remains up for debate.
Odanga and Edith, you had your hand up. Anybody else so that I can see? Edith, and then two people at the back, and then we can move on.
Yeah, I have my microphone, my goose mic, thank you. My question was for Odanga because we've talked about mis and disinformation, but I want to know to what extent is malinformation a problem, particularly within the region, and how does that affect, because we're talking about it already, the issue of politics?
Thanks, Edith. Two hands at the back. Right there. Very quick ones, please. I think we only have 13 minutes.
Thank you, please. Thank you so much from the bank. I wanted to respond to one of the causes of misinformation or disinformation.
Just a moment. We want to direct any questions to Odanga because he has to leave. Rukia and Jennifer are still here. I think
Thank you. To Odanga straight. He talks about social media platforms being responsible and accountable. But then realize that the people who spread fake news also have fake accounts, catfish. How are the social media platforms going to be accountable when the people behind the fake news are also fake themselves?
Thanks. And maybe last intervention from here.
Thank you so much. My name is Ruvimbo Gore, and I've understood that you best on saying that social media is spreading fake news. But then based on a recent research that I did personally on Zimbabwe, I've realized that the main TV station is spreading fake news and it's spreading propaganda. Then we have a certain page on Instagram, it's called Zim Celebrities. That page has saved all the Zimbabweans from the fake news that has been spread by the national TV. So in as much as we want to blame social media for spreading fake news, can we also go back and say, us journalists in the field, we are contributing to spreading fake news as we sit on our seats as the anchors, the editors, and the producers. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think there was last burning one. Just, yes. Yes, you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor, for the chance. Earlier, my name is Muteti Daniel. Earlier, we talked about how radio, especially small and community media, how radio is lagging behind in audience research. Yeah? And most journalists depend on the social media, depend on online platforms as a source of news. So how safe is this for reporters to be reporting from fake news? Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. You got 3 questions, maybe 1 minute, Odanga. I hope you heard the questions.
Just testing. Yeah, testing. Can you hear me?
Can do.
Great. So let me respond to the first question about malinformation, okay? Now, it's very important for us to recognize that malinformation is actually the biggest problem for social media platforms. Why? Because right now, what we have been talking about when it comes to misinformation and disinformation is that it depends on a binary component, which is that something is either true or something is either false, right? But when it comes to very critical times in our society, especially such as elections or when pandemics break out, we end up in a gray area of information where we don't necessarily know what is true and we do not necessarily know what is false. It becomes very hard for us to actually verify the information that is coming out. Now, for the journalists in the room, of course, you know that it's incredibly hard to go ahead and do reporting on information that has been unverified. But unfortunately, when it comes to social media, all those rules get thrown out of the window. So, you know, this is perhaps the biggest challenge that social media companies face. And a big part of the problem is also, again, coming back to how they're designed. They're designed to allow information to go viral, and specifically unverified information has a great potential to actually go viral on these platforms. So unfortunately, we end up in a case whereby we typically, malinformation is what leads to information indigestion, or what we call information disorder. A state of being in a society whereby, and maybe the Kenyans who were around, or anyone who was around in the days following the election can understand this, we end up in a state whereby it's incredibly hard for everybody or anybody who is within that environment to actually understand whether something is true or false. It's incredibly hard for you to be able to figure out whether the information you're receiving is it true or is it something fake? And that in itself actually becomes a problem, because a lot of the people that will be there will, you know, you end up in a state of heightened anxiety within a population, which can very easily end up lending itself to violence. So one of the things that we keep telling platforms is there are some measures that they can institute to actually try and deal with malinformation, especially during critical times. One of them is perhaps trying to implement labeling policies that try to say, you know, that essentially try to say that, look, like letting people know, we don't know whether this information is true, we don't know whether this information is false, but just be careful as you consume this information, right? And try to direct people as much as possible towards information that has been verified. It is not a perfect sport, it is not a perfect science, but it is, you know, there are some emerging solutions towards trying to deal with the malinformation problem that platforms have. I hope I've been able to answer that question incredibly clearly. Now, when it comes to catfishing, I know this is an incredibly huge problem for social media platforms, because it does lead, it's one of the most direct forms of real world harm that end up happening. People get kidnapped, people get conned, people end up you know, losing their livelihoods purely because of catfishing. And not to mention, people get heartbroken because of catfishing, right? It is, you know, there are many concerns around, you know, number one, how do platforms ensure that the people who are signing on to their platforms are actually real? I think that's a very important thing to address. And secondly, who exactly becomes liable in this case? Is it the person who has tried to evade detection, or rather who is doing the catfishing, or the platforms? I would say it's actually both, because it is a platform's prerogative to try and make sure that, or rather to try and minimize the amount of scamming through catfishing that is happening on its platform, by trying to institute things like multiple forms of verification of the identity of the people that are signing on to the platform. sometimes it's going to work, but other times it's a double-edged sword also in terms of the amount of privacy that people end up, or rather not even the amount of privacy, the violations of privacy that might come about purely because of these attempts to try and prevent catfishing and, reduce the amount of scamming that happens through catfishing. It is a battle that platforms choose. Some platforms go ahead and say that, look, because we're trying to prevent as much catfishing as possible from our platform, we are going to authenticate the identity of everyone that comes on. For some people, for some platforms, they're about anonymity and saying that, look, you can join our platform and be whoever you want to be. So, there's definitely some aspects
Odanga,
of that that need to be watched out for. I
just wanted to mention that we only have a few minutes, so please maybe take 30 seconds to respond to the last question as well.
I think just on the question of fake news and safe for reporters, I would just say, journalists have to be journalists. You must verify your information and establish whether it's true offline, especially before you go ahead and report on it. Please do not rely on social media to do your reporting. It is an incredibly terrible idea. We've seen a lot of it. The bad side is much worse than the good side. That's it.
Try and put one question or ask Rukia to respond to one issue that you just said. That sometimes it's very difficult to determine whether information is true or false. And especially when we're talking about professional journalism. Is that really true, Rukia? That, even we as people, as consumers, is it true that we are unable to tell?
Yeah, that's true to some point, but like my colleague here just mentioned, critical thinking is very important when you're consuming any kind of information, yeah? But if a journalist finds themselves in a state where they are not sure of what sort of information they are going to spread to their publics, we have said this over and over, find means to verify before you share it, yeah? Because it is human nature for us not to know everything. It is human nature that you are not gonna be sure and have each and every other thing at the tip of your fingers. And it is very important to make sure that you do your research. Perhaps you look at, because what we do is we find experts in particular fields that are going to help us verify the kind of information that has just been sent to us. Because one way we do this, we are countering misinformation, disinformation, and fake news with technology. It spreads with technology, but if we want to counter it at the same rate, we are also involving a hybrid method. We are using technology with a debunk bot, and this is something that we came up for. It's a WhatsApp number, but it is managed by people who have the skills to actually disseminate the kind of information that is right, but also to read between the lines. Because sometimes the misinformation is between 1 or 2 words that are going to completely change the meaning and turn it into something that perhaps the sender did not intend to put to you as the consumer, but that is how you are going to perceive it.
Right, thank you, Rukia. I think I'm just looking at the time. And I just wanted to ask Jennifer a quick question, because the issue of accountability and liability has come up. And I'm also thinking to, to push it a little further to the duty of care. So who owes the community that you serve that duty of care? And how can we hold, because accountability is two-way. It's both on the big tech, for example, and it's on society, and even the children themselves. And I don't know how you define a child. 18-year-olds are producing content, and I think legally 18-year-olds are children. So how do we hold them to account for whatever it is that they are doing?
It's working now, yeah? Okay, thank you so much. The definition of a child is any person below the age of 18 years. So, yes, number one, the primary duty bearer is the government. We need very strong regulations when it comes to information. So we've seen progress with the European Union. They have an amazing policy on how to handle information and to what information can go into their geospace. Okay, and that's when it comes again to misinformation. It just depends on the geographic location where you are at. There's some information that they are allowed in Africa, the others that are not allowed in Africa. And I just want to respond to the questions that you spent. The problem now with misinformation, disinformation, it is gone science because of lack of a good word. So because someone wants to spread a particular misinformation, they go to the extent of having research papers, paying researchers to come with quote unquote facts about that issue. So when you as a journalist, you're going to research, you find, oh, there's facts, so this is true. And then issues to do with deep fake, okay? So there's a whole quote unquote field on deep fake, people who are just there and their work is to be able to advance misinformation. So who is accountable? For me, I think it's our governments. Okay, we have to be able to come with stronger regulations on how to hold big tech accountable. Okay. So I'm just about to finish. So we need to come very strong regulation and policies on how can we hold big tech accountable? Because without that, it's going to still go on and on and on, and we're not be able to stop it. Thank you so much.
The time managers just ensure that tell us where that clock was working, because I can't see where 1 hour has gone to. And it's was it 1 hour? Because
2 minutes.
I think it shows that our time is up, and we're eating into the next session. But unfortunately, this is an issue that can go on and on, or the discussions can go on and on, an interesting one, one that is, of course, of interest to many of us as scholars, as practitioners, as young people, but also, concerning society, particularly when you look at disinformation, from the fact that it's very, very harmful to society and to important matters like democracy and the rule of law and accountability. So thank you very much, panelists, Odanga, Rukia, and Jeniffer. And please. So I'm unhappy to leave this stage, so I'm not going to leave. Thank you anyway.
Let's give them another very big hand clap. Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor. So I just wanted to find out from the room, based on that session that we've just had, has anyone here fallen for fake news at any point, and what was that for you? You saw a story, you thought it was true, you fell for it, probably even shared it a couple of times, only to find out that you had probably shared totally fake information. Okay, very, very briefly, just share headlines, right? No detail. Do you have a mic? Okay, we'll start off with you. Just very quickly tell us, what did you fall for?
Yeah, it was Lumbuye. I think he said that the general died.
Right.
And it was very elaborate on TikTok. So it went viral. I also double tapped.
And you went quickly to say...
No, I didn't share it anyway. I just double tapped. I liked.
You became the...
I didn't verify it because I also debunked.
It became one of the RIP crowd. You know, we are always in a rush to try and make sure that we were out, fast to get the info out, yeah? RIP General. Killing people for nothing.
Ben, you remember the times of the sacking of the general?
Right.
General Kale Kaihura. I bought that newspaper, the red paper by then. I bought it every day for 2 months, but there was no good news in it.
There's one in front, and then we'll come to the back quickly, and then get ready for our next session.
Yeah, the most recent one that happened in Tanzania is we had a tragedy of Precision Air that fall into the Lake Victoria. And during the very same day, there was a video that was produced 10 months before.
Right.
And it was circulated, a police officer saying that that accident was a trial. I mean, they were doing some sort of a drill of how to rescue people by an airplane accident.
Wow.
So people were circulating it, thinking that that accident of Precision Air is a trial.
A drill.
A drill
Oh dear.
of how to rescue people. So that circulated into it was really traumatizing.
Oh, that's really sad. Do you guys, for the guys here in Kampala, do you remember the video of the parachutes from the independence celebrations? How many people fell for that? Because they shared, I think, some paratroopers from, I think, one of the West African countries. You fell for that, yeah? In Kenya. Or you guys, you thought, but you guys have so much beef for us. What? Just because we threatened to overthrow your government doesn't mean you should have so much beef for us, man. Yeah? In 2 weeks. Yeah, I think that was very, very unfortunate. We can do it in 3 days. I don't know why you said 2 weeks. Who else? Anyone fell for fake story? Yeah, there's one here at the front.
I'm just wondering, up to now I was still thinking that the video was true. And it came it came at a time when your general was threatening to come and invade Nairobi.
Oh, wow.
So we spent a whole week wondering if these are the people that are coming to invade Nairobi.
Oh, you guys know how to throw some shade. All right, okay. So I think what's going to happen is that I'm going to try and have a meeting with the general, and we are going to find reasons to actually come, because we can't accept this. We can't keep being treated like this by our brothers. Right. So we're going to do a wonderful session, and this is going to be a podcast on how to do podcasts, right? A podcast on how to produce podcasts. At EastFest last year, I mentioned that I had bought an expensive podcast kit that I haven't been able to use yet. I'm glad to report a year later that that podcast kit is still very intact. It's still brand new. So hopefully in this session, I'm going to learn how to actually use it and put it into life, because it's been sitting in my house now for a year and a half, and I keep thinking, I'm going to